Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host, along with Mr. Ken Kashuba, co-host. How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing great, Dale. How about you?
Good, good. We were just chatting before we went on the air, and Ken said that he probably shouldn't watch the news before coming on.
Gets me all riled up.
Oh, I'll tell you, some of the story and we'll be getting into this very shortly in our first segment.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away, Dale.
But some of the stories, especially that stabbing, that is so that's heartbreaking. My goodness. Anyway, well, I'm sure you'll get into that here very shortly in our first segment that we lead off now, called In Focus, and we've got a couple great guests that we're going to bring on to participate in that first segment with us. But Ken, I just want to briefly say that this is broadcast number 312, and you've been along for 170 of those broadcasts.
Is that days or years?
That's broadcast. That's days. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So anyway, let's start it off. Let's let Maringo Mike give us a little reminder here, everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
And let me find him here. Here we go.
Maringo Mike here, asking you to hit that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so you'll be reminded every time we go live. We really do appreciate your support. Now, back to our program.
He's got that down. I don't understand how Marengo does that so well.
He does it, and we're going to bring him back later on, and he's going to do it again, exactly the same way. He's just really, really good, really good. Well, folks, we're going to jump right into our first segment this evening, and this is what we call the In Focus segment. We have a great couple guests that we're going to bring on, and so the four of us just spend some time here at the very beginning of the broadcast talking about what are we focusing on, what's in the news in the world that we're focusing on, and just talk about that a bit. So been interesting. I've been enjoying doing this segment. It's been interesting because normally the four of us all have a different item that we're focusing on. So I think it's very good. First of all, I want to bring on a young man new to our program, of course, and not new to COS, but he's a young man that has gone through the Emerging Leaders program at COS. So let me bring on Jericho Nelson. Hello, Jericho.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. Jericho, I forgot to ask you this. Where did the name come from? Is that obviously were your parents very religious oriented? Is that where?
They were. It's a good question to start off with. The way my dad tells me, he was obsessed with the WWE growing up, and he always thought the name Jericho after Chris Jericho is a very cool name. And actually, yes, it does come from a religious tie as well, because my parents were both in the church. And you're like, that's just perfect. And they said when I came out of the womb, my fists were like always like this, just ready to fight. And so I just thought it just made sense. And I was a Chuck.
Very good. And you finished the Emerging Leaders program in COS. You graduated from college in May, was it? Just this past May?
Yeah, just in May.
And you're now in the ministry at a church in South Carolina, right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
And you're going to get married in 20 days. Holy smokes. I'll tell you.
It's crazy season.
Yes. Well, Jericho, thank you for joining us this evening, and I'm sure we're gonna enjoy having you on. Our next guest that I want to bring on is a young lady that we haven't seen on COS Today in almost a year. We were just talking about that before we went on the air. And this young lady is Miss Debbie Stewart. Debbie,
Nice. How are you?
good, good. So happy to see you, Debbie. We have really missed you, but it's so good to see you again. You know, I had met with Larry Hudson a few days ago to record a segment that we're going to do later on tonight on Meet the Founders, and he told me that he had coffee with you, and he said you looked good, you seemed very happy, very good, and so that's what prompted me to get a hold of you and get you back in the fold here. So,
well, thanks for having me back.
So good to have you back. Good to have you back. Debbie has done a lot of work for our program over the years, and had a little health issue this past year, but so looks like you're back on top of it, right, Debbie?
We're getting there, yes, sir.
Getting there. Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, as I mentioned, this is the In Focus segment. And Jericho, I'm going to let you lead us off here and tell us what are you focusing on going on in our country right now?
Thanks for asking that. For me, right now, I'm focusing on the relationship between the church and its involvement with its communities, particularly. As someone who's involved in the ministry, I just graduated from college and serving with the church in South Carolina. I'm really interested in how the government, whether it's the state, local, or just the federal government, how its relationship, if there is any, with the church. And so particularly today when I was doing some research, just how it's looking right now, very perfect timing. President Trump was at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. today, and he was giving an address about some things that he wanted to do in addressing why religious freedom, religious liberty is one of the core values of what makes America, America. And so he was talking about how religion and faith is what makes America. And the more we have faith as a nation, the stronger we are as a nation. So as someone who is serving with the church, I appreciate hearing that from our president, and the people following him, his cabinet, are also echoing that same cry as well. And so something else particularly that I'm focusing on with that, President Trump teased a little something that he wanted to work on with allowing the Department of Education, while it still stands, is allowing school back into allowing schools to be able to pray and openly and freely. So that was quite fascinating. Obviously, like about a year ago, there was the news with, I think it was Oklahoma, with the 10 Commandments being back in the schools and the debates with that. And so it's really interesting to see the dynamic with the church and state, and the opportunity that we have as Christians or whatever faith we have to represent Jesus in that same way. And so that was really interesting.
Debbie, didn't you do something on this prayer in
the school?
In one of your presentations from the past? Didn't you delve into this?
Yeah, we talked about prayer in schools, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but yeah, we hit that subject a while ago.
Okay, yeah. So, Jericho, do you think the 10 Commandments should be displayed in every public school? Is that do you agree with that?
I think they can, because whether believe it or not, the 10 Commandments are a foundational moral principle for all of us. I mean, you can go from honoring to your parents to killing somebody or stealing, like that. That's just plain obvious. As a human being, you don't want to do those things. And so having that moral foundation for our nation and for our schools, I think is vital, especially for kids at such a young age to understand that, even if their parents are not teaching that to them, at least the schools can somehow teach that. And so I'm not sure about forcing it, but also it provides the opportunity to say the 10 Commandments are provided in a classroom and the teacher completely disagrees with that. That provides an opportunity for them to say, yeah, this is here, but I don't necessarily agree with that, and you shouldn't agree with that either. So it poses a significant opportunity, and really, it comes down to the parents and what America was made to be, rallied around the dinner table, teaching your kids like, hey, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, And the schools should echo that, which comes back to what we're doing here at COS. Is just the government being smaller and smaller, focusing on the communities around us and just a smaller government. And so keeping our hands off our schools and all that and our families.
Even if it's not really part of the curriculum or part of teaching. I mean, I think even if it's just posted in the school, having that as a visual that the kids would read as they walk by it every day encourages the thoughts and maybe some questions about it. I know when I went to school, you could. The other thing that I think is been long gone, we said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. We stood up, put our hands over our hearts, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag in our classrooms. And that's another part I think that needs to be brought back in. Those are the things that instill the Judeo-Christian aspect of our founders and our foundation. And there's nothing wrong with teaching people that to respect the flag and respect the country that they're living in. So yeah, it's my point, my view, my 10 cents.
You would think that there's nothing wrong, but there are many, many people that I think do. And it's controversial. It is controversial, I guess.
One of the things they're doing that has been going on around here that I've been hearing about, though, is these Bible teachings or classes where the kids, they can be bused from the school over to the class and then bused back. And so I've heard more people talking about that. So I don't know if it's gaining momentum here or where we're at with that, but I thought that's pretty cool that well, they won't let them have it at the school, but they're willing to let them be picked up and then brought back.
And taken where for the class? To a church?
Well, maybe to a church, or maybe to, it could just be another building who's offered to have a class there.
Okay.
It could be a public library.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but it just, they can't necessarily, and I think this might even be during school hours. I'm not even sure. Like, they can offer the class, but they're not having it at the school. And I don't know about after school, because you would think they can have all these other clubs. They should be able to have a Bible club after school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, everything we went through in the last couple of years with diversity, you would think that would fit right in with being diverse, don't you think?
Yeah, it's only works when it seems to work for that side.
One way, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jericho, you live in South Carolina now, right?
Yes, sir. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. How's this concept you're talking about? How is it being handled in your area there?
Yeah, South Carolina is very supportive of religious freedom and expressing those values and those beliefs in the school system. One of the biggest things, like here within this church, is a lot of the people here in this church work in the school. Actually, yesterday in Sunday school, I was teaching a Sunday school, and one lady, she asked what it looks like to talk about Jesus in school when she can't. She was like, if I do, I'm going to lose my job, and I'm going to lose a paycheck to provide for my kids. And so it was perfect time that we're talking about this, but she was just like, just noting the drastic circumstances that she can't freely talk about Jesus and her church. And if a kid asks a certain question, she can't answer it freely. And so she has like that shackle on her over her mouth where she can't freely speak. And so it was really disheartening to hear that, but also at the same time, there's hope and there's still a purpose.
Yeah.
And although we might not be able to speak it verbally, we still have the opportunity to reflect Jesus through our actions. And so that they can't stop. They genuinely can't stop that. As much as the government may try, they can't stop our actions and our heart flowing out through our hands and our feet.
Okay. All right. Good. Debbie, what are you focusing on?
Well, I've been kind of paying attention to what's going on with Health and Human Services, the CDC, RFK Jr., just watching like the Senate committee hearings that were going on.
Did you watch that whole thing? Did you watch that whole?
I just saw some highlights, honestly, and the highlights they were just really attacking him. And he was coming back with saying, you guys are lying. Like that's not true at all. And they're really trying hard to paint him in a very extreme wrong manner. And I appreciate the fact where he's just saying that's just an outright lie. Like that's not true. But I'm keeping an eye on the vaccines and what's going on. I noticed Florida now the Surgeon General came forward and said, hey, we are no longer going to mandate these vaccines. And that just caused an uproar there, of course. And I love that he mentioned that, God has given you a body to make your decisions for the best that you want to make them. That's your God-given right, is to say yes or no. That's an individual choice. And I really appreciated that. So that's kind of what I've been looking at, even to the point where I've been watching the World Health Organization. On day one, Trump signed an executive order to pull us out of the World Health Organization.
Right.
So we're out of it, but we have to pay for another year. So like we have 12 months before we can actually withdraw our funds. And we're paying like 14 or 15% of the world's, of the WHO's funds just from our country. And so, and some people it's interesting on the internet reading, because some people are like, oh, well, if we had some kind of a global health emergency, we would never hear about it. I'm like, right. Like, we're not going to hear about it. Everything's out there. But the other thing is they're upset because they won't be able to mandate our health decisions. And that's the issue here, because we live in a free country. And just like the Surgeon General in Florida said, we have the right to decide. It should not be mandated to us. It's our bodies. We should be able to, if we want to go get a vaccine, we can, but we shouldn't be forced to do that.
So I think that's a really important point, that he's not outlawing vaccines. He's just stopping the mandate.
Well, he's doing two things. He's stopping the mandate, but he's also saying, hey, from now on, we want to see proof of efficacy now on these. If they're not being effective, or if they're causing problems, all that has to be transparent. So we're not going to, he stopped certain COVID vaccines because they are, or I think it was some of the flu vaccines that they were trying to mRNA and they weren't working. And so there's been talk about, well, why would we do that if they're not working? And then there's been some other issues where he's put a hold on funds and things like that, because like any wise person would say, don't sell something when it's really not going to work, or worse than that, if it's going to actually harm you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just getting beat up and down left and right because he wants to do the right thing.
Well, we're gonna be. I'll just mention it briefly here. We're working on a series that one of our own doctors in COS, Dr. Dan Stock, is going to be coming on and presenting a number of episodes on RFK and what he's trying to do in making America healthy again. So we come to find out that Dr. Dan is involved in a group that's advising RFK. So at their request. So he's got some inside information, I think, that will be very helpful to everyone. I just want to mention that'll be coming up very soon in the near future here. So yeah, I caught a little bit of that Senate hearing, and boy, they were really raking him over the coals. They were really trying to get to him. So
you would think, as elected members of our federal government, that they would actually be more interested in carrying on an actual discussion and a debate as to come to what's best for the American people. But when you watch these things, it's more of the same. It's attack. It's so political that they can't come off their bias long enough to even have a discussion as to what is best for not only for the American people, but for themselves as well. I mean,
yeah,
it's disheartening to watch those congressional meetings. It really is.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I was going to just one last comment on that is when they were attacking him, they said, well, how many people died of COVID? How many COVID deaths? He goes, well, I don't know. And he goes, well, what do you mean you don't know? You're the head of the, whatever. And he said, well, because they marked everything. And I know that's true because my son and his roommate worked at a hospital in Ohio. And they said if they came in with a cut on their finger, they had to mark them as COVID positive. So if they were doing that when you walk in the hospital, what were they doing when they reported a death? Somebody that was in a car accident was marked COVID death.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so, I mean, I think it's good that the truth is getting out there in the open.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
All right, all right. Ken, what's up? What do you got going?
Well, I didn't realize this till after we started discussing this before as to, kind of the topics that were hitting this. And I know I mentioned that I hate to watch the news before we come on this program. But I'm finding out that what I'm in focus on tonight really kind of leads into and is kind of tied up in a ball to what we're going to be showing here a little bit later. And that's the media bias. But I want to start off really how I got to that was basically watching this horrific immigration tie to this stabbing that went on in Charlotte, North Carolina. I watched the video on this, and fortunately they cut it, at an appropriate time, because you watch a young Ukrainian girl who came here to get away from war and death, and came to the country, and she got a job at a pizza parlor, and she gets on the train to go home, and she's still dressed in her pizza outfit, and she walks in and sits down in front of a black gentleman behind her, and I use the word gentleman probably not nearly, just being kind, I guess, but and she's sitting there for a few minutes, and he gets up and stabs her in the neck with a penknife, just out of the blue. Just stands up and stabs her in the neck. Obviously, she bled out there on a train floor, and it turns out this guy is an immigrant, an illegal immigrant that has I believe it was at least eight criminal charges against him. He has no right being in the country. So here we are again, with what we've done to secure the border. We now have to deal with what was let in for the previous 4 years, and it's showing its ugly, evil head in everyday activity. And we're not talking New York City on the subway. We're talking about Charlotte, North Carolina. We're not talking about Chicago. We're not talking about LA. This is Chicago. This is not Chicago. It's Charlotte, North Carolina. So it was really disturbing. But I think, again, I go on ahead and tie this into where this turned around. As of late this afternoon, and I believe maybe one of these might have ended up in a segment on it. But here's a list of the news media programs that have not mentioned it at all: PBS, CNN, NPR, Reuters, MSNBC, the New York Times, ABC News, USA Today, and the Washington Post. Now,
really, they haven't mentioned this story at all.
That story hasn't been mentioned. So again, here we are.
Wow.
This is the media and this whole immigration thing and all the news that's tied in. I mean, how can you expect the country to be united on anything when we're this far divided and we can't even get the news?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's my focus, and it's not a good one today. Again, like I said, sometimes I hate watching the news before I come on.
Well, I'm glad I didn't let you start off. I'd put everybody in a bad mood, probably. Well, what's got my attention, and we've got a segment coming up shortly right after this segment, is an interview I did with our media expert. Well, he doesn't claim to be an expert, but Michael Mercier, and it's a recorded interview that I did with him just recently, and we talked about Gaza, and that is still on my mind a lot. And I'm going to say a few words before I play this video, this interview that I did with him, but because he focused strictly, his focus was strictly on media reporting about Gaza. And how his concept from the very beginning has been that the media today, instead of developing a narrative from the facts, they first develop their narrative and then they generate facts to support their narrative. And of course that narrative is normally politically biased. But anyway, so he's pointing out to me in this interview how even the conservative media is not fully reporting what's going on in Gaza. So I'm really kind of torn, but as to what's true in Gaza, what is really going on in Gaza, and it's just really got my attention. That's all I can say right now, is that I'm still trying to sort my way through this, and he's really got me thinking about this, and so I hope you all will enjoy this interview that I did with him, and you may come away feeling the same way I do. But of course, the other thing that's got my attention, of course, is the situation in Chicago with the president wanting to bring in the National Guard into Chicago. And I know we were talking to Jericho here before we came on the air tonight. Your father works in Chicago, right?
Yes, sir. That's right. Yep, he works in downtown.
Yeah, and well, and you're from Chicago, you're originally
just outside of it, yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of relate to this. I mean, it's just obvious that something needs to be done there, and once again, it's a media thing. Who's reporting the truth? Who's reporting the truth on what's happening in Chicago? How do you ignore how many deaths over the Memorial holiday? Was it 8 deaths and 50 some shootings?
50 something, yeah.
Yeah. How do you gloss over that? How is that?
Well, I'll tell you how the governor glossed over it. He said, "Well, it's a big city. This is norm. This happens. You just have to accept it." That's basically what he said.
I guess so. I don't know. That's doesn't seem
not very leader-like, as far as I'm concerned. Not very leader-like.
I'd say the people that got shot wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, that's for sure. So
there are lives being lost because of complacent government, and it's irritating. It's sad to see, and so yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time we're talking about a government that's overreaching, and here's the opposite of it in a big city like Chicago. There's no overreach to this at all. As a matter of fact, it's just close your eyes. You haven't seen what you're seeing, and it's not true, and everything's fine. It's just normal.
Yeah. I thought it was good to hear the mayor of Washington, D.C. actually come out and say, hey, Trump did a good job. We noticed crime go down to nil.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she probably got in trouble for that too, but she told the truth.
Yeah, she might be the next one leaving her party too then, Debbie. That would be fine if she just turned around and said, you know what?
Right.
The proof is in the pudding. That's the way you have to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow.
Well, folks, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us. And Debbie and Jericho, I hope you'll come back again sometime. Like I said, I really enjoy this segment of our program, and I think we all, while sometimes some of the things we're focusing on are the same, but there's also some very, very different focusing going on. So that's what it should be. So thank you for coming on, Debbie and Jericho, and I hope you'll come back again with us in the near future. Okay?
Thanks for having
us.
Thank you very much, guys. Good job.
Some good topics, some good segments.
Yep, good job. Good topics. Well, we're going to get into now, Kim. We're going to get into this interview that I did with Michael Mercier on media bias, and he really has got me thinking. And I kind of when you listen to this interview, you got to keep your opinion separate, because what he's trying to do, and he does a very good job of it, but it's difficult. But what he's trying to show us is the media reporting or lack of reporting, or conflicting reporting of what's going on in Gaza. But it's going to be very easy. It certainly was easy for me to inject my opinion, my bias in what he was saying. So,
well, I find that obviously, we're all going to have opinions, and I know that every news person, every person has an opinion. But what I guess what kind of I got thinking in the back of my mind is, and it goes back to education again. What are they teaching in journalistic schools? I mean, what's being taught there? That is supposed to be, I mean, just journalism 101 is that you lay the facts out and then you let the people decide. And it hasn't been that way for decades now. So again, I look back at our education system and say, it's been off for so long, for so many decades. And we're paying the price now, not only just in this portion of it, but in other aspects of our education.
Yep.
Just my opinion, Dale.
Sure enough. Sure enough. All right. Well, let's jump in then to this interview that I did with Michael that I recorded, and it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, Ken, when he's all done with it. All right.
Sounds good.
So here we go. Well, greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host. Well, today we're back with our media expert, Michael Mercier, and we're going to talk about Gaza. So fasten your seatbelt, because I think we're going to have a very good discussion. Let me bring Michael on here and let's get going. Hello, Michael.
Hey, Dale. How are you?
Good. Well, Michael, tell us about. I'm going to let you just get going here. We want to quickly summarize kind of what we've been through in the past with you, right. And we're focusing now on the media and the reporting of the media here, right?
Right.
Okay. So, what have we talked about in the past? Very quickly here.
Well, I just want to very quickly say that I'm not here as a Middle East expert. I'm here to talk about the observations I've noticed and how the liberal and conservative media report on Gaza. So
right.
Just want to clarify that. So
okay.
what we've talked about in the past, Dale, is I've basically presented to your audience the framework that I've developed for analyzing the media. And I've explained that I developed this framework because I take in media from all sides, liberal and conservative, mainstream, big corporate media, and then small independent media, right? And I noticed these trends. Okay. So what I basically noticed is that generally speaking, they're not following basic journalistic principles of reporting. So what they really should be doing is reporting on all of the facts that they have that are available and crafting a narrative around those facts. There's a natural narrative that would emerge if they were to lay out all of the facts, right? And what we've seen on all sides really is a change, especially since 2016, where they construct a narrative and then they engineer the facts that they present to their audiences to support the narrative. So that
right.
means in many cases they're leaving out facts, not reporting on news that actually happened, right? In some cases they're making up facts. In other cases they're distorting or burying facts, right? So, but the idea is that they're constructing the narrative first and then engineering the facts to support the narrative. And by not giving their audience on all sides, by not giving their audience the full set of facts, they're basically putting them in different realities. They have completely different notions about what is actually happening relevant to a certain news event, right? And the point I've made is that this is why we're polarized. It's really this is the main reason we're polarized. It's because we the public don't have a full set of facts. It's sort of restricted or biased based upon which news outlets we take in, and that's why we can't have a dialogue. We start a dialogue about an issue, and then I have different facts than you do, and we just end up arguing about the facts, and we can't get to solutions. So you had suggested we, now that I've laid out the framework, you had said, why don't you come back and we could talk about a specific issue. So that's why you suggested Gaza. So we're going to talk about Gaza as an example of this sort of narrative driven reporting.
Yes.
So
because I chose Gaza because what I have heard, I get conflicting information, it seems. And so I wanted you to look at that issue and give us your opinion on how the media is reporting that. And
okay, so I want to say I have my own opinions about what's going on, but those are irrelevant. What's relevant and what we should be discussing is simply what's being reported on each side.
And that's a very good point. As you know, I've got opinions too, and we're trying.
Right.
We're trying our best to keep those opinions out of here and just look at how the facts are being reported. Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I've the outlets. I became particularly interested in taking in. Looking at how MAGA outlets report on Gaza and contrasting that with how some liberal outlets that I really pay attention to,
Okay.
and NPR and like Democracy Now, some of the liberal media, but I've also been looking at Al Jazeera, which is I think they're UAE based.
Isn't okay.
Or Qatar, I forget which one, but
right.
It's a Middle Eastern news outlet, right?
Right.
And they have a program designed for people in the West, like America and Western Europe, and they stream it on YouTube. So I've watched a lot of that, and I've noticed there's so much reporting that Al Jazeera and NPR are doing on what's going on in Gaza that is being completely ignored by conservative news media, a lot of mainstream news media, and these MAGA outlets. So the MAGA outlets, for example, Steve Bannon, he's like the railhead of MAGA, and he's totally not reporting on any of this. Gateway Pundit is sort of like the print or article complement to Steve Bannon's show, and they don't report on any of these things. So if you want, I can just start walking through some of the issues that have been reported, and you can feel free to jump in and
well, maybe this is what you're going to do. I just thought take an issue and then tell us how each is being reported. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Just walk through certain news items.
Okay. All right.
Related. So one example would be the issue of the starvation.
Okay, good example. I was going to suggest that. Yes.
So there are organizations that, and I think the UN has one of them. They actually have levels of sort of levels of famine. So it goes up to 5 or even higher. And several of them have said that parts of Gaza are at 5, like extreme famine. And it's been reported that I think 150 children have died from starvation. There are, I think, thousands of children being treated for that level 5 starvation, serious starvation, adults. And this is a huge issue being reported in the liberal media and Al Jazeera, in part because the UN had been sort of coordinating, controlling a lot of the food distribution in Gaza. And back in, it was like March to May, Israel and the United States decided to take over that process. They were saying that, well, Hamas is stealing a lot of the food. It's not getting to people, and that's why they're hungry. So we'll take it over and ensure that the food gets to them. but since that time, the famine has ensued. So we've actually entered the famine since the time that the U.S. and Israel took over the distribution of food in Gaza.
Now, are we getting off base if we ask, was Hamas stealing the food?
No, not at all. And see that, and that's a good, it's a valid question. It's a valid question. I don't know. And
Okay.
often when these things are reported, they don't give proof.
Okay.
Right. So
so all right. At least we're aware of that. Okay. I think that's something to be aware of anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen any proof that they were, right. There were only claims, right. So, and unfortunately, Israel doesn't allow the press into Gaza. So your Western reporters are only allowed into Gaza if they embed with Israeli Defense Forces, and they don't want to do that, so that they're not going. So that means that the only reporting being done within Gaza is by Israeli citizens who are acting as journalists, or that they've been journalists, right? They're journalists, and so that's part of the problem. There's very little outside reporting in Gaza. And Israel is actually something like 230 journalists have been killed in the attacks, which is like the worst in any war so far. And this is a small war, relatively speaking. So, but no, I don't. It's a valid question. I don't know if Hamas was actually stealing the food, right? But if we assume if that was true, since the U.S. and Israel have taken over food distribution, that's when we've started to see the famine ensue. And they think it's, there are estimates being reported on those sides that it's going to get a lot worse in the coming months. So that's an issue. I've never seen, Gateway Pundit report on it. I don't hear much reporting on it. Steve Bannon's never talked about it, but it's a big issue right now with those liberal outlets. So there's an example, if you talk to your, I've talked to some of my conservative friends about this, and they don't believe me, or they tell me I'm being lied to, right? So we can't really discuss it. We can't really discuss it. And it is something that should be reconciled within a given news outlet, right? We should have a news outlet reporting on what's being claimed, on each side, interviewing people that work, with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that organization that was set up by Israel and the U.S. There's no reporting on it. So that's a big issue. Another one was the United Nations. There's a woman named Francesca Albanese, and she's an Italian human rights attorney. And in 2022, so this was before the October 2023, October 7th attacks.
Right.
She was named the rapporteur for the Palestinians, and she has put out a number of reports since this war started. She put out a report. It was in March, and it was called "Anatomy of a Genocide." So she basically walked through international law, like the ICC, International Criminal Court law, from Rome, and the Geneva Conventions. And she has, in that report, she cited the specific clauses that are being violated that basically indicate that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide. That was never reported on. I never read about that or heard about that in conservative media. Okay. Yet of course it was reported by, and there are all kinds of interviews with Albanese on YouTube and with Al Jazeera, but all kinds of other independent podcasters and people like that. But it wasn't reported, so nobody knows that it's basically been declared a genocide using the standards of established international law, right? So what we'll hear people debate is, well, Israel was attacked, right? So they have a right to defend themselves. Well, that's fine. They do have a right. Everyone has a right to defend themselves. Every nation does. But it's being reported that technically what they're doing is a genocide, and very few conservative outlets are reporting on this. She put out another report in July, and it was called "From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide." And basically, what she did was she again used international law to show that there are companies that are supporting Israel in this genocide. For example, companies supplying drones or parts, military equipment, things like that, software that are supporting this genocide, and very few people reported on that. I heard no mention of it from Bannon or Gateway Pundit, yet it was reported in NPR and Al Jazeera, PBS. So there's another example, right? The findings of this international human rights attorney working for the UN. These reports are thoroughly researched. I mean, I've looked at them myself, and they could easily be accessed and debated on the news media. I haven't looked into this a lot, but I have heard news reports. It's not something I've researched, but I hear news reports that the Israelis themselves, there are groups of Israelis, like my understanding is it's thousands or tens of thousands protesting every day in Israel against this war. That's really not being reported. There was a meeting in Colombia in July. It was like 30 nations took part in it, basically to talk about what's going on in Gaza. And they basically came out and condemned it. I didn't hear any reporting on that. So part of what we're hearing here when I go through this is, and these news outlets are talking about this, a lot of the world is sort of coming to the conclusion that this is really bad. There are people saying things like, I don't think Israel is going to be able to recover from this. I heard some reporting today that things are happening, like Israelis are being kicked out of hotels. Things like that are happening. Like nations around the world are really feeling like there's something really wrong going on there, and they can't believe that the U.S. is supporting it. We don't really hear that in our news media, right?
Right. Well,
so
yeah.
we don't know that the other world, and I'm not saying that means we should change our views, but we should know how we're being perceived, right? We should be hearing about this, and we're not. So I have more things, but I thought I'd pause and see if you have any reaction to what I've said, or questions or comments, or.
Well, I think it comes back to, who do you believe? Now, I have seen the protest in Israel. I have seen that reported.
Have you? Okay.
I have seen. I have one or two other things that you mentioned that I have seen reported. In depth, no. But I guess the point here, I guess we got to come back to the actual point here, is that
right.
how strong the media reporting of these things is in our world,
right.
and I think our enemies understand that. Right? Don't you agree, Michael? I mean,
understand. I'm not clear on what you're saying. Understand what?
Understand how the media works, and how strong media reporting is, regardless of which side you're on.
In terms of shaping opinion?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah, they know that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that they know how to take advantage of that. So this is, I know it's so hard to keep from slipping over into the opinion side here.
But part of the point, Dale, is that the things that I've walked through, right? If they're not being actively reported on, you're saying you've heard them. I haven't heard them on these MAGA outlets, right? Which I know that a lot of MAGA supporters. You know,
Yeah.
Steve Bannon has 1 million subscribers, I think, to his podcast.
Now,
Just
Steve Bannon, he was a Trump in the first Trump administration, right?
He was, but he's like he defines MAGA. He's the MAGA thought leader outside of the administration. So he formalized Trump's thinking on MAGA. He really did.
All right.
So outside of the administration, people view Steve Bannon as being the MAGA thought leader. And like during the 4 years that Biden was in office, he had all the people who were critical to like Trump's administration, all the MAGA congressmen, they go on his show. He's like the go-to person for MAGA. But by not reporting on these things, that's the problem. If we're not having, there's you know, it's significant if 30 countries get together in Colombia to have a 2-day conference about this. That's big news, right? And it should be covered and debated, and it's not. You know, you said you saw reporting on the that there are protests in Israel.
Right.
What does that say? That should be discussed. Like, how many people are protesting? Is the Israeli, you know, is Israeli society really divided by it?
There are a lot of people that protest daily here in the United States. I mean, I think that's just kind of a given that there are going to be people protesting. No matter what a government does, there's going to be people protesting.
Right,
So,
but it should be debated. I mean, there could be something more. Israel's a small country, right?
yes.
Let me mention a couple of other things. One is there's a lot of, I don't know if you've heard this, but discussion of from the beginning of this war that Benjamin Netanyahu, because he was on trial, I believe the trial was ongoing, I believe, when this war started, for corruption, and the war has allowed him to put off that trial.
Yeah, I recall that. Yes.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people who believe he is the one perpetuating this war to avoid being prosecuted. To have to go back to his prosecution.
Yeah, yeah.
The other issue we talked a bit about this is the death figures. The death.
Okay, quickly, Michael. We're down to just a couple minutes here.
Okay. Well, the death toll in Gaza, that's not discussed, and the Hamas Ministry of Health or whatever the organization is, they have the tally at 65,000, and many people believe it's much higher because there are so many people killed in the buildings that are bombed.
Yeah.
That they don't recover.
Yeah.
So they're only counting bodies that they recover. So these are examples of there's been no reporting on any of these things in the outlets I've mentioned. So
I think what you're telling us here is that if we're going to wind this up, I think what you're telling us here is here's more examples of how the media is reporting or not reporting on certain things. And sure enough, even from what we consider the conservative side, things are not being reported, right?
Right. And the question is why?
Why? Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's we don't have time to answer that part of it.
Right.
The why.
But I think there are answers. But yeah, I think there are obvious answers. They're engineering the narrative because they want the war to go on.
Well, maybe Michael will bring you back and we'll delve into the why.
Okay.
That'll be probably hard to figure out as well and hard to accept. But anyway, I want to thank you for enlightening us here. I think it's an excellent example of how media bias.
Right.
That's just all we're talking about, media bias here.
Right.
So Michael, will you come back again?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Michael. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, folks, that wraps up our interview with Michael Mercier. And as usual, very, very interesting. And if you're like me, kind of leave you a little bit torn in one way or the other. So depending on your opinion. So we'll have Michael come back again, and we'll maybe try and delve more into the why here. Okay, very good. All have a good day, and we'll see you again on COS today. Well, what do you think, Ken?
Dale, first of all, I want to let you know that there are a couple of comments I'll bring on here shortly that we've had from our chat group here. Excuse me, but I find it difficult to understand or believe that we can't. Now, and at best I recall, I do remember seeing. I mean, I'm gonna focus for a minute on the food situation. I do recall seeing at least a picture. Maybe it was video. I'd have to go back and check, but I remember seeing something where I saw a truck with supplies loaded to the hilt and members of Hamas standing on top of it with their guns.
Right.
I remember seeing pictures of people standing behind fences, obviously reaching out with their hands, wanting food, with their hands through the fence, looking for food. What does that picture tell you? What did that picture tell me? It told me that food was being brought in and not necessarily distributed the way it should have been. So I guess the part I can't understand, we have satellites that can zero in and tell me how many hairs I have on my head. Why don't we have satellite coverage of what's happening to these food distributions and these trucks coming in and out of Hamas? I don't understand that. Excuse me. The other thing is, Gaza is such a small area. And I know, when you look at Ukraine and Russia and the war there, we have people with boots on the ground there to give us actual reporting, standing here with a microphone with video going on. Why can't we have any of that in Gaza? Is it because Hamas is a terrorist group? And any reporter that shows up with boots on the ground to tell the truth is going to end up underground somewhere in one of these caves that they're holding other people in. Is that the reason why we get boots on the ground? Let me put a couple of comments up that came in, and then I'll get back to you. Here's one from both of them are from Certain Elf, and he says, "Where are all these independent podcasters getting their information from? I'm sure very few have boots on the ground per se." So that was the one comment he said. The second comment was, just because someone is reporting it doesn't mean there is truth in it. I think we all have seen that. If the liberal media wants to use the media to paint the U.S. as the enemy, they will. I'm not saying that there aren't segments of our government, aren't segments of the United States that are against Israel, and again, we've seen this in our own streets, and protests for that reason, because they think Israel is part of the problem, and in some cases they think we're part of the problem. So I'm not denying that there are segments of our population that don't like what we're doing or think that we're wrong in this. But again, I go back to who is this in Gaza? They are a terrorist group. They're not a country. I don't even know if we have. Do they have I guess they have an official leader somewhere, but they're not looked at as a. They're not even in Iran or in Iraq. They're just terrorists, is who they are. So I agree with you. I've seen some of the protesting of people in Israel against that. They've got the same problem that we have here, where you look at the government and people are on one side or the other. I understand that, but when it comes down to it, this goes back to to biblical times, the eradication of Israel, and these terrorist groups. As far as the way I look at it, again, here, I'll give you my opinion. They are evil, and that's what we're fighting here: good versus evil. So I understand fully what Michael is saying, and I from what I gathered from his previous segment, you have to listen to a little bit one side, listen on the other side, and then form your opinion.
Yeah.
And I continue to try and do that to come up with what I consider to be the most truthful opinion. And in my opinion,
what he's saying is that both sides are not being presented, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah, in this segment, he's talking about both sides are not being presented. Well, why is that? That's what I'm saying. Isn't there?
Well, then you get into the why. See, it's so easy to. I think it's a normal reaction to get into why, to ask why, and then you get into, well, it's a terrorist group. Whose fault is this? Who started this? Do you trust this reporting? Then you start. But I guess what Michael is saying is, if the reporting is not complete, then how are you able to form an opinion? How are you able to answer your own question of why? You're not.
I guess, and that brings me back to my technological answer. We know where everybody is at every moment. We're tracked. We're they put an ad on Facebook. You look at an ad on Facebook and it follows you around the rest of the week. We have satellites that, again, can zero in on an ant on the ground, and we can't say, well, here goes a shipment of food into Gaza. Let's follow this and see what happens with it. Why can't that be done? Or maybe it's being done and that's not being reported to us.
I don't know. So
that's my whole question. That's my whole analysis of it. And I know it's not very good, but again, it comes back to the thoughts of it. And I have to go back then and rely on the fact that if you go back and look at history, I think that will tell you a little bit about the state of Israel. I think it'll tell you a little bit about the state of Israel.
All right.
Oh, wait, we have one more comment here. Let me see.
Okay.
I'm going to throw certain elf's hot on this topic tonight, so we got to give him his voice, okay? He's saying they use civilians as shields so they can increase the casualties when we strike back.
Yeah.
So that is that truth? Have we seen bodies come out?
That is a long time. That's been said for a long time.
Long time. So
they hide behind hospitals and schools. That's been proven too.
I mean, there's nothing. I don't need reporting to tell me that, Dale. I mean, we know that goes on. So All right. Okay. Interesting topic, and I'll be glad to see Michael come back with the next segment. But that's kind of where we're at. I'm at anyway.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Ken, take a few minutes here and tell everybody about that QR code up there.
Yeah, that QR code right there is going to tell us that you appreciate what programming we put out here and are a supporter. Whether you agree with our opinions or what other side you are on, it really doesn't matter. If you're a supporter of at least hearing the debate, you're going to hear the debate here on this channel. But get your smartphone out, take a snapshot of that. It'll just ask you for your name and your email address. And by doing so, we'll add you to a platform whereby you can start conversations with other people that have their own opinions as well as ours. So that's really just a support QR code. We're not going to ask you for money. You don't have to donate, and we won't plague you with emails.
All right. Okay. Well, I want to move on to our next segment. I caught up with Larry Hudson again, and Larry does our Meet the Founders series, and he's working on Ben Franklin now. And we've already done one episode on Ben Franklin, and learned quite a bit, actually. So he's given us episode 2 here, and there's going to be some more episodes coming. But I caught up with Larry over the weekend and interviewed him and recorded this interview with him on episode 2 here of Ben Franklin. So let me get right in.
I was just going to mention, when you mentioned Ben Franklin, the image that pops in my mind is him standing here with out in a lightning storm with a kite.
With a kite.
So I'm looking forward to hearing what else Larry has to say, because that's a great image, but I'd like to know more about Ben Franklin too.
I don't know if we're past that.
His invention side of him.
Yeah, I don't know if he's. I'm sure he'll get to that, but right now.
Well, there's so many though. There's so many inventions I think he was responsible
Yes,
for.
You're right. I think you're right. But he's been focusing so far on his life and development and his personal life. And
I'm curious to find all that out. I just wanted to throw that in. And when you mentioned Ben Franklin, that's what I see.
That's a good thought. I'll ask him about that. Okay, let's go here. Well, greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, COS Today host. We're back with Larry Hudson. And we're now getting ready for our second segment of Meet the Founders. And we're talking about Ben Franklin here. So without further ado, let me get Larry on here and let's get started. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Dale. How are you?
Good. Well, we're back again here. We've already done one segment on Ben Franklin, and you told us that, he came from humble origins, had little to no formal education, ran away from home while indentured to his brother, and had religious concerns. So you want to pick it up from there then?
Yeah. Well, let's get started, Dale.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much where we ended up. I did leave off with, I think, maybe a bad impression. So I thought I'd get, before we go on, I thought I'd get back to his religious beliefs. Him being a polytheist, and I don't want to leave that hanging with anybody. So I wanted to start back where we left off with his religion.
Okay. All right.
As I said, I think I mentioned that he was a polytheist early in his life, but that doesn't stand up to scrutiny toward the end of his life, or actually toward the middle of his life. In fact, I got a quote here. He went on to write in one of his writings that he conceived that he, God, that is, has in himself some of these passions that he planted in us, and that since he's given us reason whereby we're capable of observing his wisdom in the creation, he's not above caring for us, being pleased with our praise and offended when we slight him or neglect his glory. And then he went on to write, and this is the important one, I think, I love him, therefore, for his goodness, and I adore him for his wisdom, and let me resolve to be virtuous, that I might be happy, that I may be loyal to my prince and faithful to my country, careful for its good, valiant in its defense, and obedient to its laws, abhorring treason as much as tyranny. Help me so, O Father.
Yeah.
So these are definitely not the words of a polytheist, even if they, don't meet the strict definition, perhaps, of a Christian.
Well, okay. Well, we know he was a man of words and well written, and I think a man of strong faith. So let's just leave it there.
Yeah.
What about marriage and family? You mentioned last time that he actually left his somewhat promised bride pretty abruptly and went to London for several years. So tell us about that.
Well, it's true. If you recall, he only wrote her one letter during that time. I think I mentioned that before, but perhaps I didn't. But after 3 years in London, and he drops her one letter, and that was it. he comes back to Philadelphia. He eventually found work in a printing shop, and he soon became its manager, actually. And but I need to point out that, if you were a bachelor in your 20s back in that era, you were frowned upon at that age. You needed to be married. That was a responsibility for a young man. So Franklin, he's now 24, I think. Yeah, he's 24. He sets out to find a wife, but his first priority was to find a woman who would provide him a suitable dowry.
That's I've heard that in history and seen that referenced. It was the woman had to provide the dowry, huh?
Yeah, money.
And
it was very important. And he planned to use that dowry, from what I've read, to pay off a debt. Basically, he'd purchased or was part ownership in a printing house, and so he had debts to pay. And so toward that end, he started courting a woman, a daughter, a young lady, actually, of a friend who he'd been told by his friend he could expect a large dowry. But unfortunately, the parents found out when the topic came up, and they declined to pay it. There wasn't going to be any dowry as far as they were concerned. So that relationship ended. And it was about the same time that he learned about Deborah. He had courted her early before he went off to London, and he'd made some marriage promises to her mother. And she'd gone off and got married in his absence. She got one letter, so she figured it was over with those two. And she'd married a man who she found out later was already married. So he was, she was his second wife. To make matters worse, he was a fraud and a crook. He fled the country to, I think, the West Indies to avoid being thrown in prison for debtor's prison, they called it. And
holy smokes!
Yeah, some historians that I read said that Franklin actually pitied Deborah. That was their assumption. He pitied her situation, and he kind of held himself, responsible by abruptly sailing off and leaving her at home there in the lurch, so to speak.
Wow. So Deborah and Franklin, they do get somewhat married, right? I mean, I don't know what it would be called at that time, but a common law. I think I see here in your notes. You might explain that then?
Yeah, they begin living together basically as though they were married.
Okay.
But, there was no wedding ceremony. Nothing was performed in a church. And Deborah, she couldn't prove that her husband was dead. He was gone, but she's still technically married to him. So I
guess that was kind of unusual for that time and day. That time, wasn't it?
Well, the common law arrangement. I don't know that was unusual. I think it would be unusual for Franklin to do that, or at least I thought it would be. But they had to do it to avoid. You have to remember, this was in the 1700s. She would have been a bigamist if he had returned. So they just lived together in a common law arrangement. And just a few months into that marriage, if that's what we want to call it, a baby suddenly appears on the scene in their home. And I read where several historians believe that the baby was the result, most likely, of one of Franklin's dalliances with another woman. And so the child was illegitimate. And by all accounts, Franklin took custody of the child, a baby boy, and the name of the mother remains a mystery really to this day.
Really? Huh. Yeah. Okay. So Deborah didn't get pregnant. I mean, this baby just appeared, right?
Yeah. Some historians actually believe that maybe she did conceive the child, before she took on the name Mrs. Franklin, and that Ben took the blame, so to speak, to save her honor. But it really doesn't bear much scrutiny because, if she was pregnant and had given birth at home, there would have been friends or relatives that would have known about it. And Deborah herself would probably have been, rather quick to have claimed the boy her own, which is something evidently she never did. So it makes much more sense that, the child wasn't theirs. It was in fact illegitimate. And that kind of explains the strained relationship that several people have mentioned in their writings that existed between her and this boy throughout his childhood there in her home, which she tried to keep from Ben.
Okay. All right. Well, did they have any more children?
Yeah.
Did they have any children actually of their own?
Yeah, they went on to have 2 children. And I'll mention at this point, William, the boy that was illegitimate, went on to become the governor of New Jersey. And unfortunately, he becomes estranged from Ben during the Revolutionary War, which we'll talk about a little later. But they did have 2 children together. The first one was Francis, who they called Frankie, but he died, I think, at the age of 4, I think it was, from smallpox. And then a couple of years later, they had Sarah, and she lived to a ripe old age, went on to give them 7 grandchildren, I believe. And she actually became Ben's nurse during his final days of life. And Deborah, poor Deborah, on the other hand, she spent the last 15 years of her life without even Ben being in the same house. He was always gone. He was in Europe for most of this time as a diplomat, as a scientist. He was gone a lot. She died really alone, being with him for 44 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like she was a pretty lonely, unhappy woman, huh?
I think she probably was. Many would say that that old Franklin was just far more practical, I guess would be a good word, than he was romantic. He was a kind of man of the head and not the heart. The marriage was definitely different. I read in his autobiography that he said that marrying Deborah Reed eased his conscience over his earlier treatment of her. And I think that it was a marriage of convenience for him, and maybe a marriage of regret for her. Their common law marriage didn't help him any socially. Some historians think that she might have been an embarrassment to him.
Yeah.
She was uneducated, evidently. She seldom got, read, invitations to visit socially. He left her at home when he went to visit the gentry class. So he did not really think of her as a gentle woman. Their union was useful, but not very romantic. So he even coined an axiom that he put in Poor Richard's Almanac. Let's see if I can find it here. You remember the axioms from Poor Richard. He said, on the topic of marriage, keep your eyes wide open before marriage, half shut afterwards. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Something to that. Okay. Well, you mentioned the gentry class.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Oh, tradeswomen. Is it tradeswoman?
Yeah, tradesmen and tradeswomen.
Tradesmen and tradeswomen. What do you mean by these terms?
Well, in early colonial America, when you think about it, England at that time was a very classed society. And the same thing it handed when the settlers came here. They brought that with them. Our society was divided into 2 tiers: the the tiny elite at the top, the gentlemen, if you will, and their ladies on dominating, if you will, the bulk of the commoners, at the bottom. And becoming a gentleman was not an easy task. Most people, almost all, were born to the class of nobility, and no amount of hard work or wealth was ever quite enough to make the grade if you were a commoner. If you were born a commoner, you would just always be a commoner. And Franklin, remember, was born a commoner. He was a tradesman by birth. He was a son of a chandler, and as a young man, he was apprenticed as a printer, which became his trade. His trademark was the leather apron that printers wore. So at this point in time, tradesmen, all those who worked with their hands, no matter how wealthy they might become, could never legitimately claim the status of a gentleman. And Franklin was kind of, well, I don't know, caught in a trap. He couldn't escape, regardless of how famous or wealthy, which are both attributes, if you will, that he will eventually become. He's always a commoner, and she was always a common woman.
Okay.
A tradeswoman.
All right. Well, listen, you mentioned earlier that Franklin he did have a son and a daughter with Deborah. The son died as a toddler. And then there was his illegitimate son, William, right?
Right.
Now, according to your notes, you used the term doted here on William. And was that because of his the position that he reached, William, and during the Revolutionary War?
Well, yes.
How did this happen? I guess.
Well, Franklin, Franklin was. Remember, William's illegitimate, so
right.
I think Franklin decided that he had to do what he could to make this boy successful. So, I mean, he taught him the printing trade to start with, but he saw to his education. He took him to Europe when he was a teenager on a couple of his trips. He helped him obtain a military commission. I think it was during the French and Indian War, and he used influence to help him gain other political positions within the colony of Pennsylvania. He took him on a trip to Scotland, and then I think they went to England first and then to Scotland, and he made some contacts for him there with the aristocracy. At some point, I don't know how old William was, but he found favor and was appointed the royal governor of New Jersey. And after a number of years, apart from his father, he's on his own, he's married, he becomes his own man. And he was a popular and I think effective, from all I can read, able governor. And he was looked upon very favorably, by the crown. So he was naturally a loyalist. And as such, he was against the patriot cause for independence. And that was building in the colonies as he was a governor of one of the colonies. So Ben had become persuaded that the patriot cause was now necessary. And so there's a rift that's going to start to form here. Oh, and I think interestingly, I'll point out here too, young William, who I said was married now, he also fathers an illegitimate son, just as Ben did. Yeah, like father, like son, eh? Named him William Temple Franklin, as I remember. And Ben, turns out, develops a real deep affection for his grandson. Evidently, they shared, as he got older, they shared the same political views. And he ultimately serves as Franklin's personal secretary.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah. So,
well, anyway, you mentioned, you say Franklin became more and more persuaded that the call for independence had become vital, and that it was absolutely necessary for us to get call for, and you say this was, you're not sure this was not always the case?
Well, no, it wasn't. Remember, Ben was a loyalist early on. I mean, he was a monarchist. He loved he loved being, when he was in Europe, in England, he spent a lot of time at court, and he liked that. He thought we could be persuaded and work our differences out. But about 10 years or so prior to the war beginning, he had become convinced that we had to separate. There was no longer avoidable. And he assumed that the differences with the British, could be resolved. But once he did join the COS, he was, I guess, all in, as we might say today. And he expected that William would be persuaded like he was.
Yeah,
but he was going to be bitterly disappointed when he tried to convince William to join the rebellion. He even told him he could get him a generalship in the army under General Washington, but William was adamant. He refused. He was insistent that most Americans wouldn't even support the rebellion once it got started. So his break with his father became stormy, and it actually became public. He made 2 speeches to the New Jersey legislature. Remember, he's governor there. And he urged their legislature to refuse to endorse the newly formed Continental Congress. And Ben was a delegate to that Congress. So there's splits now, out in public in written form. So their differences are irreconcilable right now.
I tell you what, Larry, we're about out of time, and I'm going to say let's kind of wind it up here on this note. Obviously, Ben and his son William are on opposite sides, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Do they ever reconcile? I don't think so, right?
No, it's actually pretty sad.
Why don't we, if you don't, can we pick it up next time at that point?
I think I would be happy to. Yeah.
Because
I know you got time constraints.
Yeah, sorry.
Sometimes I go down rabbit holes and I get a little wordy.
Okay. No, that's okay. No, it's very good. So why don't we wrap it up there for this segment, and we'll pick it up at a later time and start with segment 3, and we'll start with Ben and William there separating, going separate ways here in regard to the Patriot cause.
Yeah, I'll mark it here.
We'll pick it up from that point. Okay.
Yep. We'll look forward to it.
All right.
Got it.
Larry, once again, thank you very much. Doing a terrific job on this. Very, very interesting. I'm learning a lot about Ben Franklin that I didn't know about here.
Maybe some stuff you don't really need to know or want to know. I'm sorry if that's the case.
Well,
I find some of this stuff interesting, but not everybody will.
His marriage and personal life, I tell you, is very, very complicated. You got to pay close attention. So anyway, thanks a lot, Larry.
You bet.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
We'll see you.
Well, folks, that winds us up on Ben Franklin. That's episode 2, segment 2. So we'll pick it up there next time. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Amazing, huh? I tell you, Ben Franklin was something else. I'll tell you, it's really, really interesting. Like I'm very truthful about this. I'm learning things about Ben Franklin I never knew. So
me as well. Yeah, me as well. Matter of fact,
and like Larry said, some of it don't care to know. Anyway,
no,
very good.
I learned about having my eyes half closed. So, that's one thing I remember for sure.
Yeah, Larry's doing a great job. Hey, Maringo Mike wants to remind us again here. Let's listen to Maringo Mike real quick here.
Bring him on.
Rango Mike here, asking you to hit that like, subscribe, and especially that notification bell so you'll be reminded every time we go live. We really do appreciate your support. Now, back to our program.
Amazing, word for word. Boy,
You're right. He doesn't miss a beat.
He doesn't miss a beat.
He must have memorized that. I don't know.
Must be. Well, let's every week we try to bring in a sample of Dave's Daily Dose. So let's listen to, I think Dave's going to talk about the Trump derangement syndrome here.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, let's listen to what Dave's got to say.
I expect someday in the near or not so near future that TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, will be listed among psychological maladies in the PDR, the physician's desk reference. Why, oh, why are so many so hateful? I am extremely close to suggesting an interstellar, otherworldly reason. A recent Gallup poll I cribbed from the Huckabee Post said that 76% of Republicans who responded said they're satisfied with how things are going these days in the US of A. 0 Democrats. This is Dave's Daily Dose on BrokenRoadRadio.com. I'm David Allen Punt, but not because Democrats and Republicans have a difference of opinion. It suggests that there are no Democrats in the world that think that America is a country worth living in, that everything is bad, the world is nothing but a big effluent sandwich, and there's nothing left to do but take another bite. I can't understand that. I can't toss in with a crowd who thinks everything is bad, understanding that many are tying all those bad feelings to Donnie J., the only president we have at the moment. It's almost as if folks who answered the pollster's question believed that if they said the worst, it would hurt him personally. And most of them don't know him, have never talked to him. Maybe the best thing to do would be to get on the phone and start calling everyone in the country, just to chat. Don't ask for anything. Don't ask for a campaign donation. Don't ask for a vote. Just chat. I understand trying to understand and figure out bad things about policies, what a guy gets done, and then suggest that the debater would change and what they would change and how it would be better. But none of that is happening. No one has a better idea. Granted, maybe I've thrown in the towel too early. I've read that D.C. Mayor Muriel is willing to have coffee and cookies at the White House again, now that it's safe to walk the streets. So 1 convert, 100 million to go. Okay, 2, if you count the former Democrat fundraiser Evan Barker, who put out a very convincing article of why she left the Democrats and thought that Trump was a better choice in the last election. She still lists herself as an independent, but she's gotten over her TDS. I'm David Allen Punt.
Hey, Kim, maybe we ought to have someone do a presentation on TDS. Actually,
It sounds like a good one. It sounded to me like Dave discovered that there's at least somebody that recovered from it. So there's got to be some research done on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap things up this evening. I just want to mention very quickly on COS today, next Monday, we got a gentleman coming on from Iowa, I believe we determined, Dave Serta, and he wants to talk about burn bags and classified documents. So that ought to be very, very interesting. And we'll see what else we can put together for our program next Monday. And of course, we'll lead off with another In Focus segment like we did tonight. So different guests. So ought to be another good one. If you have any questions about our program, comments, suggestions, whatever, drop us an email at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Well, Ken, that's a wrap. Let's let Maringo Mike close us out here this evening. And Everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed tonight's program. We're trying our best to bring what we think is pertinent in today's time from the COS perspective. So hope you've enjoyed our broadcast tonight. So Ken, was there I before we sign off here, were there any other comments or things from viewers tonight?
Certain F closed it out by saying hooray for Ken's QR code. So there we go.
I think you created that one, didn't you? No?
Yeah. Well,
No.
you'll have to try and find both sides of the reporting on that.
All right. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Have a good evening, everyone.
See you next week.
Marengo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.